Howdy, and welcome back to yet another Workshop Wednesday. This week's topic is getting started. Actually, technically, that's the addition. The topic is getting used to Google Analytics 4. We're going to talk about what exactly it is and if it's even something that you need right now. Welcome if this is your first Workshop Wednesday. My name is Chris Mercer. Everybody calls me Mercer. You should as well. And whether you found us through our podcasts and talks, maybe through some of our content gets shared with other platforms like CXL Institute, Social Media Examiner, Digital Marketer, or Measure Summit. Maybe you are already a member, whether a free Toolbox member or a Measurement Marketing Academy or Measurement Mastermind member over at measurementmarketing.io. However you found us, of course, we're happy that you're here. It's our job to help people just like you learn how to use all these tools. Specifically today, of course, we're going to talk about Google Analytics 4. Again, not a complete training on Google Analytics 4, but just the concepts, right? This is a getting started edition after all. And we, of course, should always mention the Measurement Marketing Academy. This is our flagship training program. We'll talk more about this at the end of today's content. As with all of our trainings, just remember one thing, especially when it comes to GA4, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces that are happening in measurement, and Google Analytics 4 has a lot of parts and pieces in and of itself. So we're going to talk about a bunch of those things. Your job is not to be an expert in Google Analytics 4 at the end of this training. It's just to pick up one new thing, one new idea, maybe one different way of looking at something or something you didn't realize you might be able to take advantage of with Google Analytics 4. Practice that. Then you come back, make it even better, right? Always get good enough to get going, make it better later. You can always rewatch these workshops. It's why we make them available for you. All right, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Wow, I had a cough back there. This is why we get to edit that out. All right, that's why you get to watch these live. Getting started. What is Google Analytics 4, and do you need it now? All right. We're going to go ahead and dive right in. And of course, we always start with the framework. Remember, plan, build, and launch when it comes to your measurement systems. That's all it takes. It really is 3 simple steps. We're all starting in the blind, right? We all start. But eventually, we want to get through the system so it reliably produces revenue and profits. How do we do that? Step number 1, planning. Questions. What questions are we trying to answer? What information will we be able to collect to get the answers to those questions? And most importantly, what actions will we take based upon the answers we get? Then we move into the build. This is where tools like Google Analytics 4 come in, because you will want to make sure that Google Analytics 4 is measuring for the results you're trying to measure. We'll show kind of what some of that looks like as we go through some tours a little bit later on. You got to make sure it understands where the traffic's coming from. Now, the good news is if you're doing that with Google Analytics, kind of what they call universal analytics, the regular analytics that you're probably already using, then that's probably already done. And then you have to connect the dots. This is the story part. You got to make sure that traffic is connected to the results generated from that traffic. This is Google Analytics 4. It's a little different. And as you will see, we'll give you a tour again in just a few minutes from now. Then you launch your measurement system. So we listen to the conversation that's happening between the users and the website. Based on those benchmarks, we can then forecast what our near future is going to look like. And then we can measure against the forecast. That's how we know what particular step to optimize. And that is, of course, the measurement marketing framework in a nutshell. All right, let's talk about why Google Analytics 4 is even happening in the first place. It really is because of this. This is what we call the superstorm. All of us are in this. You and I both are in this together. This is what it looks like in the world of measurement. This is what it's going to continue to look like. Probably will look worse. I just couldn't find a picture that made it worse. Maybe a big giant tidal wave or something coming through would make this what it is, and a fire. Like it is exactly what's going on right now. It's crazy. There are 3 primary reasons we are in this superstorm, like 3 individual storms that are colliding right now in our industry. The first is tech. Tech is changing all the time. Apple and Facebook got into a tiff in early 2021, about a year ago as of this recording. And obviously that was a big change for Facebook. Caught Facebook totally off guard. It hurt them quite a bit, these technical changes that are coming through. But Apple, it's not the first time they've done that stuff. They did it a couple years before that when they got rid of third-party cookies with Safari, which is their browser. Chrome is going to get rid of third-party cookies in about a year, let's say. About 2023 is when they're supposed to do that. So that's supposed to happen. So, and then you've got browsers like Brave that exist that never existed before. Brave, you aren't supposed to be measured at all, right? So you have these technical changes that are coming out that make it harder to measure, harder to collect data. Then there's the laws. Of course, the big famous one is GDPR, but there's lots of them out there. California has one. The US will certainly have one. Other countries will have them. And Brazil's got them. They are everywhere. And there's going to be more, not less. And that's because, of course, there's a big switch in the mindset of who owns data. Is it Facebook that owns the data because you clicked on a link that you liked on Facebook, and so they put you in their database and they collect it, and now they own that piece of data? And the laws are basically saying, you know what? No, that's not true. It's the user who clicked on that like button that owns that data. They own that data point. They should be able to get it back. They should be able to get it, disconnected, whatever else they want to do to it, because they're sort of like leasing it to Facebook, right? So that's sort of how this is thinking. There's a big switch in who controls the data, right? The power of the data. And then finally, this is the biggest storm of all, which is users. All of this is happening. The reason tech is changing, the reason these laws are coming up are because users are upset, and they kind of should be. There's a lot of people who have misused measurement. They went crazy with retargeting. They didn't care about relevance, and they ruined it for everybody, right? So this is what's coming from. Users are fighting back, saying, you know what? Enough's enough. You don't need every single bit of data. I don't want you to have every single bit of data, and I want to control that data. And if it isn't because of the technical changes or the laws that are causing that to happen, because obviously those change based on where you are in geography, the users are adding things like ad blocker extensions. Not that hard, pretty easy. Or they're using browsers like Brave. They're just making a choice to switch to a different browser where you can't be measured. Like, this is what's happening. And it's going to be more and more and more of this. So remember this. Just get used to this. And this is okay. It really is. It's really, really okay. There's going to be less data that you can measure next year. And it's going to be less data the year after that. There's already less data this year than there was last year that you can measure for it. That's okay. You don't have to measure every single person. But when you have these three storms colliding together, this is what creates the superstorm of measurement that we find ourselves in. And of course, where are we in this picture? We're right here. Kind of looking at all this going, oh my gosh, what are we going to do to survive this, right? And that's where tools like Google Analytics 4 come in. So it is getting harder to measure, but it doesn't have to be. That's because you will update your tools. You use different tools to make it a little easier to navigate through this. Does it mean that you're going to be able to say, well, I'm going to measure the people who don't want to be measured. I'm just going to figure out the tricks around that. No, that's not at all what you're supposed to do, right? That's not at all what we're saying here. The idea is respect privacy, respect the fact that people don't want to be measured, know and get very used to the fact that you're not going to be able to collect all this data that you used to have before. And most importantly, be okay with that, because the second that you give up that belief that you have to have everything and you go, well, actually I don't have to have everything because I know how to measure. I know measurement as a strategy. And when you know measurement as a strategy, then it becomes a lot easier to navigate through all this stuff, including the whole Apple Facebook stuff that went through there. A lot of people got really hurt by that because they thought they needed to know everything about everyone. It's just not true. It's not true. So measurement, right? How do we get through this? One thing is a mindset to understand that measurement is not a project. It's a department in an organization, right? And again, even if you're a department of one in your company, it's just you that's running your entire organization. Measurement should be something that's consistently worked on. It's something that's ongoing. It's always going to change. It's always going to need maintenance. It's always going to need an update. That's why we have the measurement marketing framework, because it helps you through that. It encourages that. And that's why you go through the framework over and over and over again, as we have. It's not a project. It's not about setting up goals in Google Analytics and being like, cool, my measurement's done. It's not at all like that, right? It's an ongoing thing. And you need to control the data now. This is where you hear about this, and you'll hear this a lot, this term first-party data. All that means is it's data that you have control over, direct control over that data. That doesn't mean you own it. It just means you can control it, right? So if somebody comes to you, especially if in Europe at the moment, and a GDPR request comes through, it says, hey, I want you to delete my data, you can delete the data. That's the idea, right? You want to be able to delete the data. If they say, I need you to delete all the data that you have in Facebook, well, obviously you don't control that. That's third party. You don't have direct control. They have to go to Facebook for that. So that's what this measurement ecosystem is quickly changing to, is to make sure that you control the data. And you need to still make sure, of course, you know the basics, which is what results are we getting? How are we getting those results? Many people, again, skip the how, so make sure you don't do that. But results and how is super important. And finally, building that measurement muscle. Remember, the framework is there to help you through that. So that every time you go through the framework, every single step in the framework, never skip a step, but every time you go through that framework, you build a little bit more muscle to get a little bit more used to this. And of course, in the build step, which we mentioned earlier in the framework, that build step is where GA4 comes in. So let's take a look at what this platform looks like. And then we're going to go through I'm going to give you a quick little tour of the platform, then we'll come back to it. Now, this is the one you probably already know and love, hopefully, Universal Analytics. So you have your real-time reports, you got your audience reports, right? So real-time is all about, is this thing working? Audience is all about who's visiting my site, right? All that sort of stuff. Acquisition is all about where the users are coming from. The behavior is all about what actions are those users taking. And then, of course, conversions is what are the results of all those actions. So this is universal. This is the one that you're already using. And this is key. This is such an important thing when it comes to Google Analytics 4. This is not a either or thing. You don't switch. And there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace because Google, I think, made a very unfortunate decision when they called Google Analytics 4 an upgrade, because they also called Universal an upgrade when Universal Analytics came out. For those of you that are old enough in the industry to remember Classic Analytics, and then it was like, oh, here's an upgrade to Classic. It's called Universal. And it really was an upgrade. You just flipped out the code on your page and everything was fine. The interface was exactly the same. All the reports were the same. It was just Classic Analytics, but better because it could do all sorts of extra stuff. That is not Google Analytics 4. Google Analytics 4, is it an improvement to Universal Analytics? Absolutely. But it is not an upgrade. It's a completely different platform that happens to share the same name. And this is what it looks like. So this is the home screen for Google Analytics 4. Now you can see radically different already. We've got these main reports. You have what they call exploration reports, where you can explore the data or analyze the data. You have advertising reports that are specific, obviously, to advertising. And you've got a configuration where you configure what they call events in Google Analytics 4. So this is already top down. It's radically different. So if we look at the main reports that are in the report section here, you see you have your real time still, which is kind of like, is this thing on, right? Like, are things working? That's really what the real time is all about. It's still answering that question, like, is this thing working? So you can see what real time is happening here. Then you've got the user lifecycle. Now, I like how they organize this, right? Because they're thinking, and this is kind of the beauty of Google Analytics 4. Google had an opportunity to take the original Google Analytics, right, which was Urchin at first, and then they bought it from Urchin. They called it Classic. Now it's Universal, and they've been improving on the same architecture, but they can only go so far. Now they've had this opportunity to say, you know what? Now we know what the world looks like. We know what the internet looks like. We know Internet of Things is a thing. How would we possibly create a platform based on the old architecture? The answer is you couldn't. So they had to rebuild it from scratch, and that's the beauty of Google Analytics 4. Is it a little different? It's quite a bit different, but they got a chance to build it from scratch, so it's pretty powerful. Now, lifecycle, let me make sure they're here. Lifecycle reports are the journey. It's all about the journey of the users, which is what we should care about, because we're here listening to the conversation between the website and the users, and the customer journey or the customer lifecycle is part of that. So they have acquisition reports, but you'll notice not so many, right? Not so many back here. They don't have a lot of reports in Google Analytics 4, at least not yet. I would imagine more will come out as this platform matures a little more. But you got the basics here. And one cool thing about Google Analytics 4 is it was built to measure users, not visits. In the beginning of the original Google Analytics 4, it was all about the visit, right? What they call sessions. But we know that's not what it's like. There wasn't multiple devices back. I mean, if you can think that far back, remember hit counters? For those of you really old in the internet like I am, hit counters. You'd refresh your page and a little hit counter would go up by 1. That was analytics. Like, that's what all it used to do. So now that Google Analytics, obviously Google knows what the world is going to, and definitely they are pretty much dictating where it's going to go in the next 10, 20 years. So they know that, okay, users are out there. Users have different devices. Let's measure by user instead. So there's user acquisition, so you can see traffic sources to acquire the user to begin with. Then there's traffic acquisition. I would say this is really session acquisition is what I would think would be a better name for this, but it's per session. So the session that the user came in. So I might have acquired you through, let's say, Google Ads, but then the session you came in through an email once you were acquired as a customer. That's how the difference would look like here. And again, we'll give you some tours of this a little bit later on in detail. So you've got the acquisition stuff, which is all about where the users are coming from. Then you have engagement. This is all about the actions that users are taking. Now, a big difference in Google Analytics 4 is that everything's an event. In Universal Analytics, there's a thing called events that you have to customize for very specific behaviors that you want to be customized in your own journey. But in Google Analytics 4, everything is an event. And events have all these different names. And again, we'll show you that in a second, what this looks like. And each of these events is a specific action that you desire from your customers. Things like a page view or a purchase or generate a lead, right? Things like that, an event, a milestone. That's what these are. So this is all where the action stuff is. And then monetization, of course, is the results, right? What are the results specifically when it comes to purchases is what this is made up for. So you have this here. So those are the 3 main sections that are in your lifecycle reports. All of you will have that. Now, this little part here, we've customized ours a little bit, so we're not going to cover this, but you can build what they call a library of reports that you like, and so you can set that up. Again, it's a pro when it comes to Google Analytics 4. And then there's the who reports, right? Like, who are my users? That sort of thing. Remember those questions? Well, that's down here under user now. So instead of lifecycle, it's under user. And then you have your typical reports, demographics, what tech they're using, mobile versus desktop, whatever. So that's sort of how that looks in Google Analytics 4. So it's quite a bit different. Again, we're going to dive into these reports and give you a very quick tour of what they look like in just a second. But before we get too far into it, I wanted to sort of step back. Now that you've seen the difference, it does look different, right? Even the real-time reports, you can see they look different. But how do we think about this? Because I think that's really the challenge when it comes to Google Analytics 4. So let's pull this up. So we have kind of like a tale of two analytics platforms right now. This is Universal Analytics, and this is Google Analytics 4. And I'm about to point out something that is very important when it comes to Google Analytics 4. In Universal Analytics, remember, everything was all about visits, right? Or sessions, right? They call sessions, used to call them visits. So everything is about the session. And so if you have a customer journey where they're coming in through desktop and they see a page view and then maybe, a couple of page views, they decide to ad block or something, so those page views don't record. Maybe you've got they come to a different device. All of those are, they accept the cookies just fine and everything records properly. They're on their phone, but they block it. So you can't record any of their session. You don't even know that they're there, and that's what the kind of gray versus green would mean here. Here, maybe one of the pages doesn't get recorded for whatever reason. This is Universal Analytics. Now, if this happens in Universal Analytics, which it does, it happens every day, this is what it's going to report. It's only going to report the green stuff, only the stuff that it knows happened. So let's say the exact same situation happens with Google Analytics 4. This is, again, the beauty of Google Analytics 4. It's helping to future-proof our measurement because it understands that it's about to walk, actually it is in the world, that there's less data out there, and there will be less data next year, and there will be less data the year after that we can measure for. It knows that. So what does it do? It was built with machine learning and artificial intelligence. From the start, it wasn't an add-on. It wasn't an afterthought. It was, listen, we know we're not going to be able to measure every single person every single time, and that's okay. We just need to measure enough of them to get a statistically relevant sample so that we can model what happened. And that's what GA4 does. So notice the dark greens here, Universal's dark green, and then GA4's dark green over here. These are all what actually happened. But what GA4 will do is it'll model things and it'll adjust your data in Google Analytics 4 to show what they call modeled conversions. And this isn't just a Google Analytics 4 thing. All the platforms have to do this. There is no other way around it. Facebook is also modeling their conversions. Google Ads will be modeling their conversions. Everyone is modeling because they know they cannot possibly capture every single conversion because somebody's going to be blocking something. Somehow, that's what's going to happen. No matter what, it's a guarantee. So they get good at modeling, and that's where the machine learning and the AI kicks in. Now, is it perfect right now? No, it's early days. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than not having anything at all. Imagine instead of, you just saw this where you didn't even know that they showed up on your phone or on their phone, which is possible, probably happening right now with Universal, right? But Google Analytics 4 would go, well, statistically, this many people do it with their phone, so modeled, here's how many people you're probably getting with your phone. Like, that's sort of what it's doing, right? And specifically, it's starting with conversion modeling with the end results that you're trying to achieve. But that's the idea. That's kind of the beauty of this, is that it helps you to essentially make up for the data that you're not able to measure for, right? It is quite literally making up the data. Let's not mince words here. It's making it up. That's what the model does. It sort of approximate what the results probably are to give you something useful. So you can pick up trends and patterns, and when you understand the trends and patterns, you can then work with those. That's how measurement is done. Now let's talk about something else with Google Analytics 4. Specifically when it comes to your measurement. You always have what we call collect, store, and report. Like, that's always the main things you care about with measurement. You have to collect the information so you can get answers to your questions. You have to store that information in a database somewhere, and then you have to report on that information. Now, typically, with a platform like Universal Analytics, you're using the source medium reports or something like that, and you report to it. Maybe you've connected it to Data Studio or something like that, right? And that's where you see your reports. But you still have to set up the collection part and the storage part. What Google Analytics 4 offers is what used to be called, and this is why I kept it here, because some of you might have been around when it was called Web Plus App. It's gone through a lot of iterations and crazy names. But back then, they had this thing called Analyze. Well, Analyze is now that Explore section. I'm going to show you that in a second. So now what happens is Google Analytics 4 collects its information, stores it in the database, and yes, it has its reports, right? We showed some of those titles earlier. But you can also explore the data. Now, this is a bit of an evolution because Google Analytics 4, when it first came out, they were real big on saying, go to Data Studio. You should be using Data Studio for your reports. Between you and I, don't tell anybody else this. I think they're right. You should use Data Studio for the reports. It's much better. Data Studio is so much better. And you can connect Google Analytics 4 into your Data Studio reports. Makes them a lot easier to see. However, Sometimes you need to get a little deeper into the data. So how do you do that? That's why they created what used to be called the Analysis Hub, has now been renamed to Explore, which, kudos to the marketing team, is definitely a better name for that. So definitely Explore. So we're going to explore the data in Google Analytics 4. It allows you to do that. Whereas in Universal, not so much. You might be able to do some custom reports and things like that. But you'll see, for various reasons, especially when it comes to funnels, Google Analytics 4 is a clear winner when it comes to that. Finally, let's talk about the, origins, iterations of Google Analytics and some of the confusion that's happening around it. The original platform was called Urchin. And that's where, technically, a little trivia note here, Urchin Tracking Module, UTMs, for those that use those. That's why it's called that. So Urchin was the company. Google bought them and renamed it Classic, right? So, technically renamed it Google Analytics, because back then it was just Google Analytics. So they had this old code that was on there, and then they actually did the upgrade. And this is where I mentioned this earlier. They did the upgrade to Universal Analytics. You had to flip out the code to, at the time, was analytics.js code that was on there, copy and paste. And when you did that, everything was fine. The platform updated, truly updated. It went from the original platform to an updated platform, but you can tell by the colors here, it was the same platform. All the reports were the same, everything else. It just worked better, right? Things like subdomains were automatically tracked, whereas here you had to stitch them together in a weird way. So it was like all this stuff was really good. Well, then they came out with this little G-tag script, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So you could upgrade to this G-tag script, and that was not really announced. They didn't really tell many people about that. It just sort of flipped out in the background. So it's okay if you still use this analytics.js. But there's a new way of doing it, which is G-tag stuff, right? Things like what Tag Manager does. This is like a manual way of doing that. So you have Universal Analytics. This is where you should be now. Whether you use the analytics script, the Tag Manager, or manually tagging with the G-tag scripts, doesn't matter. You should be on Universal Analytics and have the most updated version of what is now Google Analytics. Then Google Analytics 4 comes out. Completely new. Do not think this is an upgrade. And here's the biggest reason why. People that think it's an upgrade are waiting to use it because they think they remember these days where they said, oh yeah, Classic, when I will eventually be forced to upgrade, I'll flip out the code and it'll be simple and easy. And that's not entirely their fault. That's kind of, like I said, the messaging is very confusing from Google. I would think the same thing. But what's really going on is Google created a brand new analytics platform that can work in parallel. So you use Universal and you use GA4. Universal's probably still going to be your production analytics platform for about a year, maybe, at this point. But Google Analytics 4 is a beast. It's going to take time, effort, and energy to get through. It just will. I don't want to sugarcoat it because there's nothing to sugarcoat. It's a completely different platform. You got to wrap your head around it. It works completely differently. And it's going to take some time. So, this is what's so important to understand is it's yes and. You do both. You absolutely do both. Now, eventually, will Google Analytics 4 eat Universal Analytics? Will it get rid of it? It will. That's exactly what's going to happen. They will eventually deprecate Universal Analytics. Rumor has it sometime in 2023. My guess is right around when Chrome gets rid of third-party cookies. Maybe Universal Analytics gets announced that it's going away too. So this is not an option for you. It's just a matter of when you start Google Analytics 4, not if. If you're going to keep using Google Analytics, you have to get used to Google Analytics 4. So the sooner you get used to Google Analytics 4, the better it's going to be for you. So that's the short answer to that question of do I need it now is you might not need it now, but you should start using it now so you can get used to it. And give yourself 6 months. Don't wait until the last minute because what's going to happen is Google's going to announce deprecation. You're going to see where they're basically going to say Universal's got an end of life and it's going away. We're not going to do anything else after this and you can't even access your data. Like that stuff's going to happen. So when, not if, but when that stuff happens, there's going to be a ton of clickbait headlines. Google Analytics is going away. You must do this now to save your data. Like all this stuff's going to come out, right? Everyone's going to do this. The world is going to freak out and they're going to go, oh my gosh, all the bosses and the planets are going to go like, hey, measurement team, you need to go flip us over to GA4 now. And people are going to do that. And then they're going to be like, oh my gosh, what did we get ourselves into? It is a completely unique platform, completely different from Google. It only shares the name Google Analytics. That's it. That's how to think about this. They're both called Google Analytics, but they are two completely different analytics platforms. So when it comes to if you should use this, maybe not today. You may not use it as your production platform today. It can do a lot of stuff. It can certainly do more than it did a year ago and even 3 months ago. They just recently connected Search Console to it, so you could do that. But it's probably not ready quite yet to be a production platform. I still think Universal is going to be that. If you are just learning Google Analytics, start with Universal, because all the lessons you use in Universal will come over to Google Analytics 4, right? That would be my recommendation. But it's not an option. You're not going to be able to say no to Google Analytics 4 forever. Eventually, you will have to start using it. And the sooner, give yourself, again, 6 months. Let's be easy on ourselves. Give yourself 6 months. If you get it done sooner, so be it. But give yourself a good 6 months of practice time to get used to this platform, because when you do that, when the rest of the world tries to catch up, they're going to be freaking out. Meanwhile, you're already way ahead of the game, right? You and your organization. So that's kind of a few different ways to think about Google Analytics 4. Now let's go back, and I want to show you, just to kind of give you a tour of what some of these reports look like. In Universal Analytics, I'm going to go back to Universal here very quickly. I'm just going to compare as best we can, apples to apples. So in Universal Analytics, my favorite report by far is the source media report. Love it, love it, love it. Because in one report, you see the identification of where the traffic's coming from, right? Who it is and what type of traffic they're sending you. You see the quantity information, you see engagement information, and you see results information, all in one spot, one report. Love it. Now let's go to acquisition reports. I'm going to go to traffic acquisition. They both look the same. So when it comes to acquisition in GA4, looks a little different. Now it's not horribly different. I'm going to do one quick thing. I'm just going to click this little arrow right down here so we can minimize and make ourselves a little bit of space. And the reason we need that space is because this report's quite a bit longer. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit because there's more to it. So this report actually has the same thing. The difference is it starts with source, and you can switch this to source medium, right? So you can still do that stuff. But it's got the users, so that's quantity, sessions, right? Quantity, all quantity. Now they have engaged sessions. This is kind of cool because you can tell Google Analytics 4, I want to know people that have been at least 30 seconds. Let's call that an engaged session. Or I want to do 10 seconds. Let's call that an engaged session. You can set that stuff up in Google Analytics 4. So now there's a difference between sessions of people who like loaded a page and left versus loaded a page and stuck around for a fixed period of time that you told Google Analytics 4 to look out for. That's pretty cool. So you have all of that stuff, all this quantity sort of stuff. Then if we go over, you'll see the engagement, right? Engagement rates and everything else that are coming through. So we see engaged sessions, just like with the source medium report. Then you have results. Now results are a little different. So we can of course have revenue, right? You got your all e-commerce stuff, but goals do not exist in Google Analytics 4. Instead, it's just a certain type of event called a conversion event. So you have conversions. So everything's an event in Google Analytics 4, and I'll show you those in just a second. Everything is an event. Any sort of behavior that we need to measure for is a specific event. That's all it is. Some of those events, you can say, make this a conversion event, and that's how they show up here. That's how actually we got these to show up, because they are conversion events. We told Google Analytics 4 as a platform, track a click as a conversion, right? Now, would you do that in the real world? Probably not, but we're just teaching this stuff. So that's why we're playing around with it back here. So that's how that works. Meanwhile, what other events do you have? All of these are events: a page view, generate lead, a first visit, right? When they first come in as a new user, when they start a session, when they scroll, when the user engagement, when a video completes, or when the video is in progress mode, when the video first starts. All of these things are events that we're currently measuring that you might or might not decide to measure in yours, right? It requires a lot of customization, Google Analytics 4. Now, it's an incredibly powerful platform, incredibly powerful, but it requires a lot of customization. So if I go back into, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the configure. I'm going to click to that very quickly so I can show you how to set up those. Again, not that this is a training, so I get that, but I want to show you kind of where everything is. So you just have like a 30,000 foot view of this platform. I just clicked on this configure section. Let me just zoom this back out here so you can see that. So I clicked on configure, and that got us into this. Here's all of our events, those same events that are here, right? These are the only ones that this particular account is playing with right now. So we're recording, we're looking, we're measuring for these events coming through. If I want to track a page view as a conversion, all I do is I say, cool, flip it over to conversion. From this point forward, it is now measured as a conversion. So that's kind of how you set up a goal. There is no more destination goal or event goals or any of that stuff. It's just, you measure your events and you collect all the events, and then you tell GA4, these are like my primary events or maybe my milestone events, right, that you want to have. And those are the conversions. That's how that works. So I'm just going to turn that back off, and now it's no longer a conversion event. It's not being measured as conversion. So that's as simple as that is, right? It makes it really, really simple. So let's go through, and I want to show you this explore reports. Remember we talked about in collect, store, and report that with Google Analytics 4, you can now explore stuff. So this, by the way, this is a fairly new feature that came out with the cross-channel data distribution, or data-driven attribution. This is just all the machine learning and AI stuff coming into play. So they're doing more of that, which is kind of cool. But they also have all of these reports. I'm going to click on, now I call them reports. They're called explorations. That's what they're actually called. And I won't go too far into these right now. Again, a little bit beyond the scope of this training, but just know that these are here. You can create your sort of pivot table in Universal Analytics. It's called an Explorer. This is where it gets confusing, I get. But in Universal Analytics, they call it an Explorer report. This is what they call a freeform report. Like if you wanted to build a landing page report, which does not exist in Google Analytics 4 right now, you have to build your own. You can do a freeform report and build your own landing page report. If you wanted to build a funnel, remember funnel visualization in Universal Analytics? So much better in Google Analytics 4 because you can create a funnel and it will retro back to the data. It doesn't just start working the second you created it. You can actually go back and change the funnels and take a look and slice and dice and change the parts and pieces and see what the new funnel looks like using historical data. It's really cool. Path analysis is kind of related to a flow report. In Google Analytics, they have those goal flow reports and event flow reports. Path exploration's kind of like that. Not quite as good, in my opinion, but okay. It tells you kind of if they didn't go to the step you want them to go to, where did they go, right? That's kind of what it's doing for user journey explorations. You have the overlap reports with event diagrams here. You've got a user explorer report if you want to see an individual user and all the different events coming from that user. I don't find that particularly helpful, because I don't think it's important to know what one fish in the ocean did. I want to know what most of the fish are doing most of the time, so I understand where to place the nets, right? That's what it's about when it comes to marketing. I want to be able to message properly, and you can't, if you're trying to catch a bunch of fish, it doesn't make sense to throw your hook in the water where there are no fish. So I don't like the one user at a time, but it's there if you wanted it. Cohort explorations, a little bit better, not great. I still use spreadsheets for anything I do with cohorts right now, because you got to keep in mind Google Analytics only knows what it knows, what it's told. And that's still okay with GA4 too. So if I'm doing maybe a retention report on our member site with those with the Measurement Marketing Academy, I want to measure retention rates. If I'm doing that, I'm not going to use Google Analytics 4 as the data source. I'm going to use our actual cart system as the data source because it's a better data source. And that's why I use spreadsheets. But again, cohorts are there if you want them. And then user lifetime reports. Again, I would take these with a grain of salt. Remember trends and patterns. Do not think this is going to be accurate. We call accuracy the A word at measurementmarketing.io because there's no such thing as accuracy. But we do want to get a useful truth. And you might be able to see that a certain traffic source gives you a better lifetime value than another traffic source, for all I know, something like that. So it's back here. But those are what the explorations are for. I'm going to click into this funnel exploration, just so you can see it and to emphasize, I'm going to emphasize that this is going to take you some time. You can see it's a little geeky, right? It's a little googly. Like, it's actually a pretty decent interface, but it's googly. It's hard to figure out. It's not super intuitive. But all this really is the variables. You sort of like define the puzzle pieces, and you have to add those, right? So you have to figure out your puzzle pieces. They gave you basics, but you got to put in the ones you want. And then here's where you sort of assemble them. And then here's where you actually view them, the result of that. That's sort of how this works. And all the explorations do that. You can create a big giant report. You can create multiple tabs. And so pretty quickly you can set up a data set, get in here and explore, quote unquote, the customer journeys that you want and the different questions you're trying to answer. You can create reports that are kind of focused on just doing that. So again, it will take you some time. There's a lot to it. And if this is the first time you've seen Google Analytics, you're kind of like, whoa, man, my head's spinning. I get it. Mine is too. But this is what it's like. It's going to take you some time. Finally, let's look at this advertising section. Now, I would imagine this is going to have more stuff as more integrations come through. But this is where your multi-channel attribution, if you ever played with that in Universal Analytics, some of that's coming through with the pathing reports, things like this. I don't find this all this useful because the way that we measure, we don't have an attribution problem. We know where our attribution is coming from. So this doesn't actually help us all that much. Hopefully, if you followed anything at the Measurement Marketing Academy, you're already doing that as well. But for the rest that are kind of in the older original way of thinking of the world when it comes to attribution, this is it. This is all that stuff back here. So if you're used to that, this is where that is. And of course, you can change your models and everything else going through, just like you can with Universal Analytics. All that stuff's back here. The difference is this is where the machine learning and the AI stuff comes in. So the data-driven attribution is back here, right? All that other things are back here. There's a little bit more modeled information back here. So it should give you a more useful truth, even if you have less data that you're measuring for, even if you have less data. And that's the key. That's kind of why Google Analytics 4 is such a cool platform. All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Again, hopefully you got at least one new thing from this. Maybe it was just this is your first glimpse at GA4 as a platform. Maybe it was, and I hope it was, that it's a completely different platform. It is not a simple upgrade. Repeat, it is not a simple upgrade. You will want to use this platform for sure. The question is when. Now I would start using it to learn it, to play with it. I would not make it your production platform quite yet. I would still stick with Universal Analytics. However, as 2022 goes through, right now we're recording this in February of 2022. as 2020 moves on, you will see GA4 become more and more of a powerful player. And eventually, the plan is to basically get rid of Universal Analytics. Google's going to one day, what they call deprecate, they're going to say, bye-bye, Universal. It's no longer a thing. And there will only be GA4. So don't wait till the last second. There is so much back there that you have to learn. You have to rethink your data. You have to rethink your schema, it's called. I mean, there's lots of stuff. And of course, we've got courses to help with that. But you don't have to learn from us. You can learn anywhere you want. Just know that you have to learn it. That it's a different way of looking at things. All right. Of course, when it comes to the framework, where does Google Analytics 4 fit in? The results are what they call conversion events now instead of goals. Your traffic still uses UTMs, so that stuff just works just fine. And then the story, like how do you hook all this stuff up? You got to set up conversion events. You got to do some customization. Cross domains done a little differently. It can measure things like video automatically without tools like Tag Manager. So there are some limitations to it, but it's pretty cool, right? So that's where GA4 fits in, is in your build of when you're working through the framework itself. All right, next week, we're going to talk about how to get the most from Google Analytics 4 using Google Tag Manager. So you'll want to stand by for that, especially if you are just kind of curious, like, all right, maybe I should start taking a look at this. What's a good way to get started? Assuming using Google Tag Manager, we're going to show you a couple of tips when you are getting stuff into GA4 so you can actually start to use it. If you want to make sure you get that video, all you got to do is subscribe, and you'll make sure to get notified. I think you have to hit the button, the little bell icon, to get notified from YouTube, and it'll tell you, hey, there's a new video for you. You also have, of course, this option, the Measurement Marketing Toolbox. It is completely free. You always get the most recent Workshop Wednesday, always, no matter what. And you get access to, I think it's over 40 different tools now that we have back there. We create these tools for our members, things like the Traffic Tracking Toolkit, so you can organize your UTMs. Because spoiler alert, it's not just about using UTMs to track traffic. You got to structure them properly, or else it doesn't really help you all that much. Using goals, how to think about which should even be a goal. Like we call them ACE goals still. Eventually, we'll be switching to ACE conversions because there are going to be conversion events, but you still have to use the ACE model, right? How do we think about awareness, completion, and engagement along the way of the customer journey? That sort of stuff's back there. There's a forecasting back there. There's a split test optimization pipeline back there. There's a dashboard toolkit and dashboard templates back there. There's so much back there in the world of measurement. We give this out as a way to help build the community. So that is the Measurement Marketing Toolbox, measure.tip/WW. If you want that, it just requires a name and email, and then it'll create the membership account, and then it's yours. The only thing that I personally ask is that you use it. That's it. Just use it. And if you don't want to use it anymore, eventually we'll take back the membership, and you can go on your merry way at that point. But if you're using it, you can keep it for as long as you want. That's all we care about. It's just the fact that you're using it back there. That's it. All right. The next thing to chat about, if the time is ready, I mentioned this earlier, the Measurement Marketing Academy. This is, of course, our flagship just-in-time learning platform. It is not one of those platforms where you're going to watch every single video we have, because we create content faster than you can possibly get through it. That's by design, because measurement changes too fast. And what you need to learn is something completely different than somebody else needs to learn, which is something completely different than somebody else wants to learn, right? So we create a lot of different content so that you can explore and really understand measurement as a strategy. Yes, there's course training on Google Analytics and specifically Google Analytics 4, but it's not just about learning the tools. It's about understanding measurement, because when you understand measurement, the tools just don't matter all that much, right? So why did we build the Academy? It's for this, for the framework, because that's really what matters. This is the strategy. When you're following these steps and you go through each of these keys and each of these steps, you will build a system that reliably produces revenue. And if you're not getting your revenue, you're going to know why you're not getting your revenue, so you can fix it. That's the whole point of this. So a very quick tour of the Academy itself. I'll go ahead and bring that up so you can see it for those that haven't yet. So in the Academy, when you first log in, you'll have access to these 6 core blocks that are here. So you've got our main content, which is the win courses, the on-demand workshops, and the toolbox. And then a couple of ways, actually 3 different ways to get support. There's the winner circle, which is the peer-to-peer, members helping members. There's the ask an instructor, where you reach out directly to instructors. You can send them videos and screenshots. They'll send you videos and screenshots back. And then of course, there's the standard, like, hey, I lost my password, type of support. That's the manage account section here. So you have that. That's not too exciting. That's just the normal stuff. But let's talk about what the win courses look like. So in the win courses, they are organized first by date, because many members in the Academy, they may have been a couple of months since they've taken a win course. So they want to come through and they want to say, okay, well, let's see what the latest win courses were, where there's an update to an existing course or where there's a new course. That's why we do the win courses by date. So you can quickly get caught up in anything you may have missed. We also organize them by topic, of course. So things like Google Analytics, and specifically Google Analytics 4. So there's our Google Analytics 4 Basics course. We've actually redone this one, I think, 3 times in the past year, and we are about to go through another one that'll happen a little bit later this year. We're waiting on a couple of changes, which I expect to come out with Google Analytics 4 in a few months, and then we're going to do another one. So we'll have this one updated again. But that's the point. Things change. So you can see how this is organized by lesson, and then each of these lessons has its own topic. Each of these is a video, just to kind of show you how to go through all of this and think about it and train yourself on it. Like, that's why it exists, right? Here's an example of kind of what one of those looks like. So you have all of the stuff that's back there. These are win courses. That's just the win courses that are back here. And of course, we have Tag Manager. We have dashboarding with like Data Studio and learning Data Studio stuff. You've got measurement strategy courses, but look at all the courses that are back here. Each of these is massive. But it's for you to go through and then for you to be able to reference back later, right? And this is really the secret sauce. When you understand how to think about measurement, tools become so much easier. So much easier. All right, so that's just the win courses themselves. Then, of course, the on-demand workshops. You're watching one of those now, which is the Google Analytics one that we just did, right? We're doing this right now. So these Workshop Wednesdays is what you would have access to as a free member. But Academy members, they actually have access to all of these. These are edited down student editions of the same workshop. But they've been edited down, Zoom effects put in, a little easier to get through. Definitely not stuff like this. This is all taken out of those. And what's more important is you don't have to stay up to date every single week and watch every single workshop, because not every single workshop is going to matter to you. It depends upon what you're trying to get done, but eventually it might. So you say, oh, I want to look up, now I want to learn about goals, or whatever the thing is you're trying to learn about. You can search it and it will show you not just what's in the workshops that talked about goals in this case, but also the different lessons that contain information about goals. So it searches the entire thing. Why is that important? Because these win courses and the on-demand workshops, they're available 24/7, no matter where you are in the world. We've got members all over the world. No matter where you are in the world, you're able to do this 24/7 on your own time, right? Whenever you want the answer, you can get it, whenever it's convenient for you. So that's what those are there for. It's the content there. Finally, the toolbox. Now, I mentioned the toolbox earlier because there is a toolbox membership. It's free. These are all the tools that you will get as a free member if that's what you choose to do with our toolbox membership. So you still have access to all of these. However, Academy members have the Get It Done guide section that they have access to. This is where we've created specific things. Like, we're pretty famous for this Eyes on the Journey report now that measures, it truly measures the conversations happening on a page. So you know to guide your marketing and work with your copywriting team. And should you flip out the headline, or should you flip out the offer, or should you flip out the body copy? Like, should you flip out the video, right? All that stuff you can measure for. You can measure for it. And this is like a little, almost like a craft kit. It's like, once you learn Tag Manager and Analytics and Data Studio, let's take your new skills and let's build something really cool called this Eyes on the Journey report. So it comes with templates and everything else that are back here, entirely for Academy members, exclusively for Academy members and beyond. So whether you're an Academy member, as long as you got access to it, you have this, right? It's kind of the benefit of this. So that's our content: the win courses, the workshops, the toolbox. Again, win courses every 4 to 6 weeks. We're doing new ones or updating an existing one. On-demand workshops practically every week at this point. Toolbox, we create new tools as we need them. We update the existing tools, and of course, the Get It Done guides come out typically around quarterly, somewhere around there. Every 4 months or so, we try to do a new one. Then let's talk about support, because you will have questions. This is one thing we built the platform for. We realized at the end of the day, if you want to learn how to set up goals in Google Analytics, I would suggest you YouTube it, because there's a million videos about how to do that in YouTube. But when you want to talk to somebody, it's really hard to do that. I know for a fact, because I know many of you leave us questions on the YouTube channel. It's just hard to support all of that. I love the comments, by the way, and I do read them, so I appreciate that. But it is difficult to offer level support. We offer that to our Academy members. That's where we're really supporting. That's where we're spending our support time. The instructors are back there helping our members. So there's a couple of ways. Now, one is the community, which is the Winner Circle community that's here. So the Winner Circle community kind of looks like this, broken down by different topics. You can see the different conversations going on, members helping members. Why did we create this? Because we're not experts in every single thing. We know measurement better than the average bear, but we don't necessarily know technical SEO, or we're not Facebook ads experts or Google ads experts. We don't run traffic. So our members do, though. And so we have agency members who are understanding measurement. They're learning measurement like you are, but they might be really good at Google ads. So you can ask them a question around that. Maybe you are really good at technical SEO, so you can help somebody else with that. But you both speak measurement marketing. You're both using the framework. You both understand what you're trying to get to. And it's just an incredible group. There are some incredible, incredible people that are back here. Everyone's willing to help each other out. And it's just awesome. I mean, it's just a fantastic, fantastic group. So cannot recommend that enough. So that's the Winner Circle community, right? This piece here. But there is the additional level of support. This is really what we created first, was this piece, the Ask an Instructor support. This is what it looks like. You click this button, you ask a question, pop in your question, pop in the description, send us over videos and screenshots. It goes to a real live human being who does this stuff for a living. right? That's an important thing. This isn't just some, outsourced customer service thing. This is people who do this for a living. They use Tag Manager basically every day. They're using Data Studio basically every day. They're using Analytics and Analytics 4 and Tag Manager server side and whatever else basically every day. Like, this is what they do. And so you send it back to the instructor team, the instructors, especially videos and screenshots, send them those, and the instructors can take a look and then give you some really personalized concierge level advice when it comes to how to do this. Sometimes it's something tactical you might ask, like, I can't get this goal to work and I'm trying to figure it out, and how do I use this thing in Tag Manager? And they will say, oh yeah, check this box and here's what you do. And they can give that to you and help you get unstuck. Sometimes it's a strategy question, like, here's my e-commerce store and I'm not even sure what a goal should be. We're thinking it's this, but I'm not sure. What do you guys think? Or here's what my reports look like and I'm not sure what to do with them. What would you do? How would you adjust it? Like, ask us that. That's what we're back there for. The instructor team is there, willing to help you out. It is the closest thing you can get to having a consultant on call when it comes to this stuff. And remember, they're there to help teach you, to help build your own measurement muscle so that you have that in-house. So that's the idea behind it. They're always there. They love answering questions. They really, really do. Because the more that you're asking, the more that they know you're using it. And they really love helping people learn. That's kind of what separates out the instructors from everybody else. So that's where you get that level of support coming from. And of course, we already talked about regular manage account, just sort of standard support. So that is the Academy in a nutshell. Now, the courses, again, you've got the Ask Instructor support, you got the on-demand library, you got the Winner Circle community. I think those are the big highlights. The courses, you get access to everything. We don't limit anything. Any available course, you will have. Anything that's a new update, you will get. Anything that's a new course, you will have. The Ask Instructor support, easily worth at least $5,000 a year, right? To have somebody that's on call for the entire year that can answer any questions that you want. Oh my gosh, you can ask as many questions as you want. Ask 12 questions a day. We don't care. The more questions you ask, the better, because the more that you're learning. Remember, they're not going to do the work for you, but they will help you get the work done. That's the idea, so that you build the muscle. On-demand workshop library, we do workshops every week. It's at least $5,000 value, because true story, we used to sell those workshops for $20 a piece back in the day. That's how we did it. And then the Academy just got so big, so much content that we just packaged it all together. So now it's that sort of value that's back there. And then the Winner Circle community itself, right? Easily worth $1,000, having access for an entire year, to having access to all that group of people who understand measurement. They get measurement. They think like you think, because we're all going through the framework, but they might be an expert in something else that you need help with. And that's where, or maybe you to them. It's really a cool group to be a part of. All told, the Academy itself gives you access to a total value of over $15,000 in training and support. So of course, it is much less than that. We encourage you to take a look, become a member of the Measurement Marketing Academy today if now's the right time for you. To do that, just go to measure.tips/getacademy, take a look at the most current offers, and we look forward to seeing you in the Measurement Marketing Academy soon. With that, we'll go ahead and officially wrap this one up. This has been Getting Started. What is Google Analytics 4? And do you need it now? Thanks again for watching. We'll see you on the next episode.